Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's great to have this group of passionate alumni joining us for our presentation this afternoon. My name is Patty Couts, and I am proud to be the first volunteer leader of the Women of UC Network. A little bit of history. Women of UC has been around for a little while. And was led by staff at the Alumni Association until June of 2023. And that's when I was given the amazing opportunity to lead this group. This is our fifth event since June of 2023, and I'm super excited to have everyone here. A little bit about myself. I'm a 1988 graduate of the Lindner College of Business. I was involved in the Alumni Council at the Lindner College of Business for many, many years, probably too many years to be quite honest, until this opportunity came along. So I am, like I said, very happy to be connected and with all of you and leading the Women of UC. A little bit about what we do at Women of UC and our programming and why you're here today. We try to offer a balance of fun experiences and thoughtful professional topics, which is why we're here today. I'm excited to hear more from our panelists today. Before we begin, though, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items just to make sure everyone has a great experience. We're going to keep everyone muted to avoid any potential background noise and make sure that everyone can hear the panel. The session is being recorded and will be shared in a follow-up email as well as posted on our YouTube page. The questions that we're going to go through today are submitted by all of you, which is great. But if you have any additional questions as the conversation goes on, I invite you to share it in the chat and we'll do our best to get it answered. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Katie Fisher, also alumna of the Carl H. Lindner College of Business, longtime volunteer, and another very proud Bearcat. I have had the pleasure of knowing Katie for many years now. During her time at UC, she was involved in many organizations, including the Lindner Women in Business, where she learned firsthand the importance of groups and mentorship between and among women in Lindner at UC and obviously in the workplace. Katie is currently the finance director for the Target team at Procter & Gamble, where she continues to advocate for women in her community. Katie, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Patty. I'm so happy to be here today. As Patty mentioned, I graduated from the College of Business in 2016. Following that, I spent a few years working at KPMG before ultimately ending up at Procter & Gamble. One thing, as Patty mentioned, I was very passionate about women's organizations when I was an undergrad and helped be one of the early members of the Lindner Women in Business organization. The things I learned as a part of that group are things I continue to carry with me throughout my career, working in both the Women's Network at KPMG and now at P&G. It's amazing to find opportunities in the workplace for mentorship, advocating. I've learned so much about both coaching and being coached. And so it's an honor to be here today to moderate this conversation between two trailblazing women who are going to share with you today their career journeys, insights, and advice on breaking barriers and achieving success. So before we dive in, I want to share a little bit about each of them. Cindy Halvorsen is a College of Engineering and Applied Science alumna who's now an executive coach at Google, where she empowers sales leaders to accelerate revenue growth through effective communication and strategic relationship building. And for a fun fact, she also won the reality TV show The Amazing Race together with her husband in 2011. Welcome, Cindy. Angela Stallings is a two-time alumna of the College of Business, an accomplished educator and an accounting professional. Angela has a rich background in tax and accounting spanning over 2 decades. Her non-traditional educational journey instilled in her a strong belief in the power of perseverance and a growth mindset. Welcome, Cindy and Angela. Thank you so much for being with us today. You ready to jump right in? Awesome. Cindy, let's kick it off with you. Can you share how your journey led you to become an executive coach at Google and what motivated you to pursue this path?
Sure. Yes, Katie. And it sounds like you have some experience with coaching, which is amazing. Really, my career journey has taken lots of different pivots. I was obviously a biomedical engineer, as you had shared by training. I started my first job at P&G. So it sounds like, Katie, we've got some common ground there in family care. And then I moved to Chicago to pursue my MBA and worked at Wrigley in Innovation. switched to marketing there. So I was in consumer market knowledge at P&G, moved to marketing, then switched to Kraft Foods, continued in marketing, and then came over to Google. I started as an ad seller. So I would sell our Google, the blue click links and the pre-roll ads that you see on YouTube, and moved into a sales manager role, ran a business that was about $100 million and grew it to $300 million in 3 years. So it was quite a big growth trajectory. And then I moved into the coaching team. So really every pivot was out of curiosity and out of the idea that something could be better. So it really came from I was experiencing certain friction points and pain points, and then I wanted to figure out, how do we make this better and how do we do this more effectively? Part of my last career pivot into coaching from sales was quite a different trajectory, and that's probably the biggest difference. Is I had my third child, and I just could not imagine being on the road 48 weeks of the year again. So some of it was utility and some of it was curiosity, but those are kind of how I landed into the coaching program. The last move was also kind of sparked by this idea of, I didn't know how to sell when I came to Google, and no one really taught me. And so when I became a sales manager, I was like, how am I going to teach other people? And I started to lean on our training and development group. And that's how I realized that, we tripled the business in just 3 years. And I said, why are not more sellers not doing this? So then we stood up this coaching by mastery program, which is the executive sales coaching function of our learning and development team. And our whole goal is to deploy the skills so that people can be more effective at their job. So all of it was out of a pain point and then curiosity of how do we solve it, which I learned at P&G, ironically, full circle.
I love that. Sounds like you've had quite the unique journey that's led you to where you are today. Angela, also, it sounds like you have a unique educational journey. I'd love to hear more about how that has shaped your approach to teaching and mentoring students, particularly in accounting.
Sure, Katie. Thank you for having us. I grew up a military kid. My dad served 28 years in the United States Coast Guard, and it was a fantastic way to grow up, but we moved a lot. And so neither of my parents had gone to college. I was first generation college student. And I started out with just 2-year technical associate degree goals. And from there, end up pulling 2 master's degrees from UC because other people saw potential and spoke up. So I believe that my journey has caused me to want to help students develop their own growth mindset, because I find many students limit their own potential because they have this fixed, I can't go to college, I can't do this, nobody's done it before me, I don't have any good influences. So when I share my own path and how when I changed my mindset, it changed my trajectory, I hope to show them that anybody can do it. And I often quote Henry Ford, who said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And so all you have to do is change your mindset, and attitude is everything. And it's something that you're in control of and you can change.
I love that. I think that's great advice we can all keep in mind as we navigate our own individual journeys. Both of you mentioned some of the unique turning points throughout your experience, but I'm wondering if you can share an example of someone who inspired you throughout your career and how they impacted those journeys that you shared. So Cindy, if you want to start.
Sure. I feel like I draw inspiration from a lot of people, but given this is a Bearcat group, actually one of the people who inspired my first career transition was another Bearcat. Heather Rogers is her married name. She was a senior when I was a second year, and we met in Chi Omega in the sorority. She was an engineer too, and made the change over to P&G into this consumer market knowledge group. And I just remember having this moment where I went to med school orientation at Cincinnati. I was supposed to be a doctor, and I just had a freak out moment. I cannot do this. So I was telling a few people about this, and then Heather was like, I think you would be amazing at P&G. Why don't you just try to apply? And she kind of encouraged me to take that first leap. And she was the one who told me, you don't have to be the thing everyone told you need to be. right? So I grew up in a home where you were either a doctor, lawyer, engineer, bonus points if you were two. So, check on engineering. Didn't quite make the doctor thing. But she kind of broke that mold for me. And that really inspired me to then think differently about what I was capable of and how I was made for something different than being a doctor. So she continues to, progress in her career, and she also works in tech now at Amazon. So it's just been a very fascinating, back to the roots of Bearcat, like that little moment of saying, hey, I think you could do this was enough to feel inspired to take a different course.
I love that. I think it's a great example. Angela, I'd love to hear your answer, but really quickly, Cindy, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more then on how you've taken what that inspiration and helped break the mold for others as you continue to move into more leadership positions.
Yeah, in a way, I think that moment was a little breadcrumb for me. So, if you follow me on LinkedIn or any socials, I talk a lot about breaking the mold of what it means to be Asian American and kind of unleashing the expectations that society puts on us and the expectations we put on ourselves. And that's like a really clear moment in my mind of just kind of untethering ourselves from one thing. And that goes to Angela's fixed versus growth mindset, right? If you're fixed mindset, you're told like that you are a good student instead of like you don't know that thing yet, right? It's kind of the difference of growing into something bigger than you are versus believing you are what you currently are. And yeah, that kind of underpins a lot of my coaching approach as well. It really helps me develop other people as I career mentor them and just help them think about any career moves. But just untethering yourself of what's known. It actually, sorry, I feel like this is a thesis for my life. It's actually the underpinning of my TED Talk that I delivered last year, where I talked about we don't all have one singular identity. We have many. And how do we break through those identities and those known ideas about us? So yeah, I guess Heather really just like was a butterfly effect for me.
I love that. That's wonderful. I think we'll definitely want to dig into that identity piece more. But Angela, I'd love to hear who inspired you and where you got all that wonderful advice from.
I have to say that there's been numerous small moments that have had a significant impact on my pathway and my career. I couldn't think of just one specific moment. So, a coworker who pointed out that I was the best person around at dealing with difficult customers, and they suggested that I should study business or taxation or even the law and be a litigator because of something they saw. And I thought, I didn't realize that. And so then, I start an education journey, and a spreadsheet software teacher suggested that I take an accounting course because he saw my attention to detail and thought there was potential for further skill development in other areas. I said, well, I'm not that good at math, but okay, let's try that. And then while working in college, I was at a hotel front desk clerk position on the second shift. And the CPA came in and was doing an audit and asked me to help develop and complete work papers for an audit review. And he said, wow, you should consider a career in doing this. You seem like a natural. And then as I'm finishing my bachelor's degree, a wonderful advisor said, have you ever thought about graduate school and earning an MBA? And I was like, no, do you think I can do that? And it's just these little sparks that put ideas of maybe I should try to do that just to see what happens. And then during my later career, when I was struggling with what next and where to find joy and happiness, a community college hiring panel allowed an extroverted accountant an opportunity to teach, learn new stuff, develop pedagogy, and that changed my pathway as well as now the pathway of all my students. So each one of these small moments opened a door that changed my trajectory, my pathway in significant ways. And I'm grateful for all of them.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. In both of your stories, you talked about the impact that other people have made on your careers. And I think part of how we create those moments for ourselves is through networking. So can you talk a little bit about how networking has come to life in your respective fields, and any tips you have for everyone on the line today on how to build meaningful connections and not just transactional ones? So Angela, if you want to start and continue where you were.
So I believe that networking is very important. And one of the first ways that you'll get better and more enriching opportunities to network is wherever you are, whatever your organization, you need to buy into that mission and support that mission in authentic ways. No matter what school or company I've been involved with, you know, the mission is the driving force. And so I remind educators all the time that the students are the mission. Okay. I would have researchers argue with me, but in the end, I truly believe the students are the mission. I would also tell people that they need to focus on the quality of their connections over the quantity of their connections, that few deeper connections are better than having 1,000, LinkedIn connections. As you're attending those opportunities to network and build your connections, active listening skills cannot be overlooked. People need to feel engaged, show interest, and then that gives you the opportunity to offer support or suggest collaboration where that might be appropriate. Everybody needs help doing something. And so sometimes just offering to be that help is what can build that relationship better. I also suggest that people join a professional group, especially if they can find one for women, and volunteer in your community, give back, whether it's for junior achievement or the Scouts or your local church. You will meet others and add them to your network connections that can potentially open doors in the future. And a lot of those same efforts have helped me in the past. Every place I've ever lived, I've reached out to junior achievement and volunteered for them because that played such a major impactful role in my high school experience.
I love that. Thanks for those different examples. Cindy, do you have anything you want to add on how networking has impacted your career? And
Sure. Yes. I mean, it's really, truly all about who you know and how you interact with them. Every job move I've made is because I've either worked with somebody or for somebody who pulled me into the new position or the new company. My suggestion here is have an objective for why you're networking, and have a variety of people that you network with that can fulfill different roles. So what I mean by that is there's a few different roles. Everyone hears mentors, right? Mentors like help you by showing that they've gone through the same challenge and they show you how they navigated that challenge. But I think many women are over mentored and under sponsored. A sponsor is somebody 2 levels up that can pull you up the career path. They can also be someone who is a diagonal to you, meaning your manager's peers, because they can show you a different view of how you're operating and working in an environment. And then other types of roles that you might need are cheerleaders, someone who's just going to tell you, Cindy, you're badass every day, all day, because you need those confidence boosts, particularly for women who can tend to be a little harder on ourselves. You also need the naysayer, like, Cindy, here's a blind spot for you. You need to work on how you're showing up in these experiences. And then, of course, you need a coach. You need someone who's going to believe in you to work through your issue, because you have the most context to that. You can watch how your mentors do it. But if I'm being honest, like, a lot of my mentors do not look like me, because there's not many people. We can have a whole different talk on this. There's not a lot of executives that are Asian women who were born and raised in America. And there's some like unique challenges that we face in terms of our identity here. But it's hard for me to watch a white man who has the same issue with me approach something and be like, oh yeah, that's going to work for me. Well, it's probably not, because they're getting the benefit of the doubt and they're getting some other values that, I can't bring to the table. So yeah, if you fulfill all of those different roles, your network effect will start to multiply. So just know, like, why am I networking and what does this person bring to my network? And if, sometimes those relationships are short-lived and they're a purpose for that moment. And that's okay. You need one career pivot, their purpose for that moment. It's okay to shed some of that network, but maybe you say, thank you so much. Can you introduce me to 2 people who help me with my next goal? And so that's how you continue to multiply your network without, Angela said, don't only have a whole bunch, but have them have meaning and depth. These are like maybe 2 tools that you can use to build that meaning and depth with your network.
Awesome. I think that's wonderful. I was taking some notes over here because I love a lot of what you shared on how to really build out that network around you. Angela, I know you talked about what skills are critical to be successful as we think about networking. Can you share some key skills that you think are essential for success in accounting that you would share with your students or that have helped you get to where you are?
I do think there are lots of different skills and different areas that accountants can go into with their basic degree. What I like to tell my students is be on the lookout for different designation, certification things. The accounting industry is experiencing a decline in students who seek to earn their CPA. The test has changed, and for whatever reasons, a lot of students see that as a barrier. The amount of education necessary to take the CPA exam and become certified can be a deterrent. There are so many other certifications available today, and I tell my students, try to achieve as many as possible. Something as simple as getting Microsoft Office Specialist certification in Excel or Word and putting that on your resume shows that you have drive, initiative, and skills, right? Certified bookkeeper with the American Institute of Professional Bookkeepers, payroll certifications with the National Association of Certified Bookkeepers, certified internal auditor designation with the Institute of Internal Auditors. And if you're interested in taxation, becoming an enrolled agent with the IRS, all of those certifications can open doors and help you demonstrate that you have developed skills that are essential for success. And especially with women, if you have something like that on your resume and the next applicant who just happens to not be female doesn't have it, maybe that'll get you the opportunity for an interview where you can then shine and show your work.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. I know there's a number of different industries represented on the phone today, and some of what you shared was specific to accounting. So if you're in a different industry and interested in kind of building up some of those certifications, where do you recommend people start to know where to hunt?
You can always start with Google. If you have a trusted advisor or a favorite professor from when you were in school, you can reach out to them for their advice. You can also look to LinkedIn for people with similar job descriptions and see what kind of certifications they have highlighted on their profile, and do your research there and see what you're qualified to pursue.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I know we talked quite a bit about certifications and how those are a big achievement. Cindy, you have your own incredible achievement with winning the Amazing Race. So as we kind of have been talking about skills throughout this whole conversation, can you share some of the skills or lessons that you learned from that experience and how they've helped you in your career and in your personal life?
Sure. Gosh, there's so much to be learned from just putting yourself out on national TV with your spouse. So if you aren't familiar with the show, teams of 2 race around the world and they complete a series of challenges and tasks in order to be the first one to cross the finish line. And I raced it with my husband. We were engaged at the time, and I think it's been already 14 years or so, 13 or 14 years. So it's been a while. The biggest skill there, one, is communication. Having really effective communication with your team or with your partner is imperative, right? Like everything that goes wrong is usually because you haven't communicated your needs or you haven't effectively discussed how your needs differ from somebody else. So communication is like the biggest skill for me. Then just kind of managing your emotions is another one. That experience, you're tired, you're hungry, you're paranoid, you don't know where other teams are, you're just like, there's so many emotions. And in order to really navigate through calmly, you need to know when to use those emotions and when to manage them really well. And so those are kind of two of the main skills, I would say. Of course, like being physically able to actually run and do some of the tasks is important, but maybe not as relevant from a career standpoint. Some of the things that I learned that are really important to know are, one, that was a crash course on how other people see me. When you start to read the blogs and the reviews about how people are experiencing you, you begin to wonder, do people experience me this way at work too, in my social life, in my personal life? Is it congruent with the experience I want them to have of me? And so I started to notice where I felt like ick watching myself, and I wanted to change how I showed up and just be a little bit more professional or a little bit more thoughtful in the way I interacted with other people. Lots of other lessons just to be known, like playing to win, right? Having that fierce competitive spirit. If you're just in it for along for the ride, like you're not going to get ahead. You have to be having a goal and like working towards that goal and breaking those goals down into smaller, meaningful moments so that you can actually get ahead. But yeah, those are probably some of the top skills and then lessons that I learned on that show.
Awesome. I'd love to dig in a little bit on what you shared about emotional regulation and thinking a lot about how you show up. I think that's something that women deal with in the workplace, particularly women in leadership positions. So I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on any specific challenges you've faced in regards to that, or anything that's really you've noticed as being a woman in your position and how you were able to overcome those things. So Cindy, if you want to continue with that.
Sure. It's kind of this double standard where people identifying as women, we don't get the leniency to be emotional in the workplace in the same way that men do. We also get judged much more for how we show up on an emotional level. However, on the flip side of that, so I was given advice or like feedback early in my career that I was too emotional in the office place because I was just like so passionate that we had to do this thing. I was so passionate that I had to get promoted. And I realized that was coming off a little bit juvenile. And more recently, someone told me, they were interviewing a bunch of candidates for promotion. And they were like, these candidates were just too eager for promotion. And I'm like, what's wrong with eager? And like, it felt like they were desperate for it. And there's this fine line of like knowing you want it and deserve it versus like acting desperate for it. And that dichotomy is also much more apparent for women. But it's also her superpower. When I lead a team, they're like, I've never had a manager care for me as much as you have. I've never had a manager empathize with my emotions and my frustrations as you have as a manager. And so that's like one of the things that I've noticed as I've gotten more mature in my ability to regulate these emotions. I can deploy them for moments of need, and then I can suppress them when it maybe looks like I'm just being too eager for promotion. Still working on that every single day, but just knowing your audience and knowing your situation and then recognizing and naming the emotion that you're feeling. Like, do you want to portray that emotion? Sometimes being really passionate is important to inspire other people. Sometimes it comes off in a different way. And so getting the feedback, getting the naysayer back to our networking point, getting someone to just show you the mirror, all of that will help you build over time how you in your individual situations can present yourself to a group.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Angela, I know you're in a unique position of both being in an incredible field where you've made a huge impact as well as getting to impact future professionals. So can you share a little bit about challenges you've faced being a woman in those positions and how you were able to overcome them as well?
I am a firm believer in that there is a broken rung on the corporate ladder, right? And so women are less likely than men to be hired into, not only entry level roles, but then to get promoted. So it's no wonder that we're perceived as eager. I was once told that my appetite for success was coming off as aggressive. And I'm like, well, gosh, but the men in my department can have the same appetite and aren't, perceived that way. That just kind of deflated my balloon that day. But I feel like if companies had more development opportunities for women and minorities to become leaders, offering leadership development programs, mentorship programs inside companies, then as we saw more women in leadership roles, I think we'll see a shift in leadership styles for the better. So women leaders tend to focus, like Cindy said, on building network organization, prioritizing empathetic leadership. They could be more inclusive, be more collaborative, be more flexible. And I think we'll develop more human-centric workplaces once we see more equal numbers of women in leadership. And so my personal challenge is, to champion that cause in higher education where I am. In accounting and taxation, I don't think we have as big a challenge, but it's still a challenge.
Yeah, I think you're correct there. I know you mentioned a little bit about affinity networks. Cindy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what changes you hope to see, in addition to the ones Angela shared, kind of over the next decade as we think about women's representation in the workplace in general, but also in leadership roles across various fields.
Yes, I would love to see more representation at the executive levels and at the board levels. And I totally agree with Angela. There's not just a broken rung. There's like a very thick glass ceiling that still persists today. And there's a small hole where some people make it through. I would love to see more women who are making it through actually pull other women up. Sometimes I notice that the women who make it, to these executive positions, they're like, I went through the grind. Like everyone else has got to go through the grind too. You're like, no, why don't you help us make it a little easier to get through that hole, or like show us the way through it. And I think that can come with leadership programs, and it can come with the development and investment in those groups. I would also just frankly like to see more diversity at the top. I know it's kind of a taboo. I don't know. We're like in this pendulum of 2020 all the way to whatever's happening in the world now. But the intersectional identity of race and gender, it's even worse for people of non-white identities. And everyone can point to examples of success, but it's not happening at scale. I would love this to just not be a thing anymore. Like, let's work our way out of this being a topic that we consistently have to discuss. But that takes a lot of work, particularly where our society is today in the conversations about leadership. But I'll also share that there's a motherhood penalty. So there's a lot of research shown that women who don't have children actually haven't seen the same level of negative impact on their total lifetime earnings. But every child you have is some small percentage of a deduction. So now I have 3 kids and I'm like, were they worth 9% of my total compensation over my lifetime? Like, of course they are, but does that need to be the trade-off? I would hope that that isn't the trade-off. And then if you think about female-female relationships who also have children, they're taking it from both sides of their income streams. So if all of these could be non-talking points in 25 years, that would be an amazing world.
I think that's a wonderful point that you shared. I'm curious to dig in a little more there on how you identify your next steps and continue making impacts in the business world. I know you mentioned a little bit about the grind and how that's an option to continue to try to advance women. But what if you're not interested in a high pressure career or want to lean in more to that motherhood life? How do you kind of think about those next steps?
Yeah, it's interesting because my 3rd child was the one that really made me reconsider my career trajectory. So I was on a career path to get into a higher, role profile where I would be responsible for billions of dollars of revenue. but I would have to be on the road 48 weeks of the year. And I was just kind of like, I don't want to miss the last child's youth. And so I made a deliberate decision to move into a role that was much less pay and gave me a lot more flexibility and freedom. And I recognize that this is probably a shorter moment in my life, but it's the important moment where I'm home for my kids. I can help, be at their games. I still travel a little bit, but it's not quite as extensively. And I think that's okay. We don't have to be sprinting for all 60 years of our working life. 50 years, 60 years, feels like a very long time. So sometimes, lateral moves will also propel you when you get back into it. And I think we need to just be okay with that being a possibility.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Angela, I'd love to hear if someone came to you with this situation, whether it's a student considering their first career or someone considering a career change. What kind of advice would you give?
I would say that you probably have a trusted circle of people that you could go to for guidance, whether it's a coworker or an advisor or a past manager or an instructor, to huddle up your personal board of directors and ask them for guidance. And while you're at it, get letters of recommendation, because you can never have too many letters of recommendation, right? And if you ask for them before you need them, then it's easy to pivot and utilize them to your benefit. It's also good to be thinking about when things are going well and you're networking and projects are going well at work. That's when you need to ask people to help you build that social media profile. Make sure you're getting those badges out there for your certifications, because they can show that you're capable of things that maybe you haven't tried before, that you're adaptable and flexible and a fast learner. There are lots of things to consider when making a career change, and money isn't always on the top of the list. Okay, leaving accounting industry practice and entering higher education was a pay decrease for me, but burnout is real. Okay, and you have to find joy in what you do. So when you get to that point at a position that you realize you're no longer enjoying it, you're a slave to this obligation to earn a paycheck, that's when you're probably not your most effective, and you want to make a change. But if you can plan earlier, what if I want to make a change down the road? What would I do? Going back to school is always an open door. So, investigate educational opportunities and see if that works for you. Can you make a change that way? I would not have thought 10 years ago that I would be teaching college today at the level that I'm at. But wow, what joyous day to day. I can't wait to see what happens and help shape the next generation of accountants and business owners and managers. It's just a joy. My favorite question from my students: I'm not an accounting major. Why do I have to take accounting? I love that question.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. You mentioned a little bit about when you're going through a hard time and how you, some advice you would give for how to bounce back from it. I'm wondering if you guys could share a specific example of some sort of setback that you had in your career and what inspired you to persevere, or how you really bounced back from that and got to where you are today. So Cindy, would you like to start?
Oh, my career journey has been long and definitely a lot of setbacks. I'll talk about the most recent one that just happened because Angela mentioned burnout, and I do want to recognize like burnout's real. So I had shared with you, I switched into the learning and development group from sales. The career path is much less obvious in sales enablement than it is in sales. So you have to kind of jump around, and we call it a jungle gym versus a ladder. So I was trying to jump a couple of different places, and I just kept getting no. And in a lot of my career up to this point, I did not get a lot of no's. I had a lot of choice at hand. And so I started to just really get challenged by the idea of rejection for the promotion. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe I need to demonstrate a different skill or a different way to lead. So I went and applied for a lateral move, which I thought I was a shoe-in for because the management team asked me to apply. They specifically sought me out and said, we saw that you did not apply. Would you consider applying? So I did, and I didn't get the job. And I was like super gaslit. I did not understand what was going on. I did not understand the narrative around me at the time. And it was for a role that I had been covering, and it was intended to be a 3-month coverage. We call it a bungee at Google. It turned into a full year because they were like, we love what she's doing, and then we're going to turn it into a full-time job. And now we want her to apply. So in a lot of ways, I just felt like completely unclear about what was happening. At the same time, I had been putting so much pressure on myself that my health really deteriorated, and I ended up with neuropathy, where your nerves are actually dying because your muscles are strangling them. In my case, that was what was causing the neuropathy. And so I had to take a health leave, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, it was a mental health leave. I was like, actually, no, it was like physical induced by mental because of all of this like unknown and rejection and lack of clarity. So I'm kind of in my repositioning moment of what are my values? How do I want to live my life? What does my ideal life look like? And then how does my job support that life? Versus the flip, my last 25 years has been all around how do I make my family fit my career? So I'm in the change point, and I want to say it's not easy. It's definitely a revisiting of priorities. But I feel much more calm, a lot less stress. My nerves have rehealed. And I think the setback, in a way, like sprung me forward into a better personal trajectory, maybe at the expense of career for the moment, but I'm not too worried about the career coming back when I'm ready for it to.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it can't have been easy, but I appreciate the context you provided on some of the questions you're thinking through, and hopefully some people on the call can take that away without having to run into a setback like that to have the same conversations with themselves. Angela, anything from your perspective on a specific setback that's allowed you to get to where you are?
I would say that no matter what's going on, the universe is unfolding as it should. And so sometimes you just have to recognize where you need a priority shift. And hopefully you'll never have this. But my household, my husband got a cancer diagnosis, and my priorities shifted. I was at every doctor's appointment. I was in the hospital spending the night with him. We were doing this together, and he successfully fought and won. And when we came out the other side of that, so many things looked different. And a week vacation and a comment, wow, this is so nice. I wish we could, have a place at the lake or have a place at the mountains and do that more often. We need, family time like this more often. And I said, agreed, let's do it. And so it was, divine intervention that got us to refocus on not only our immediate family unit, but our extended family unit and the quality that's there. And, I have to thank my employer at the time, who gave me the time that I needed to focus on my family. And unfortunately, when I came back to them, I was like, what I was doing before, I'm not willing to do. The 60-hour weeks is not where my priority is anymore. And so we made some adjustments, but in the end, it was one of the things that drove me to make the change to higher education, was to get much more flexibility of scheduling, and every term is different. So change in what you teach, change in the students you see, change that is expected and timed and manageable. And so if something happens, and Cindy talked about a health challenge, it may not be you, it may be in your family. It may be unfortunate, but know that the universe is unfolding exactly as it should. And every experience is the opportunity for a positive learning experience that you can use to move in another direction and find your happiness, find your bliss. If you've lost it, do what you have to get it back. Because when you find it again, life's great.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad you guys were able to overcome that together and that everyone's doing well today. I'm curious, as you think about some of the boundaries that you enforced coming out of that, what are some either red flags or green flags that you would encourage people to look for at an employer as you think about being able to carve out time for yourself and be there for your family? Angela, if you'd like to start.
I think post-COVID, the biggest question you can ask is flexible scheduling. We've figured out that in a lot of careers, where you do it is not as important as how well you do it. And for some places, cattle calling everybody back to the office just because that's the way we used to do it doesn't necessarily mean that now you're going to attract the best, the brightest. Having that flexible work schedule, having parental leave and adoption leave and benefits around those kinds of things, flexible work arrangements. There's all kinds of different things that you can look for. And again, it goes back to the entity that you're working for. If you can't support the mission, it's not going to matter what the money is. You've got to be able to authentically support that mission and grow in that role, and it meet your needs and you meet their needs. So I would say, look at the policies and what they're offering you. And of course, we have technology to help these days. You can go to websites like Glassdoor and see what is available at certain companies. We have some companies here in the Columbia, South Carolina area where I am that are focused on attracting women. And so they give generous family leave, they give flexible scheduling, they lay out what they need and when they need it, and they assign people to teams, and teams cover the need. They don't get bogged down in the minutia of the scheduling. The teams work it out amongst themselves. And for pharmaceutical manufacturing, it's working out very well. So I'm supportive of those kinds of things. And when those companies and their reputations for hiring and their flexibility precede them, they get lots of attention when they come to campus. And that's a good thing.
I think that's a wonderful call out. I remember applying for jobs out of undergrad and not spending as much time, I think, as I should have on thinking about things like parental leave and whether or not the company had a women's network. So I got lucky working for two wonderful companies, but I hope that the next generation is more astute in their observations of companies. Awesome. Well, we are getting towards the end of the day. So before we wrap up, I would love to ask you each one final question for everyone here to take away with them. So what is one final piece of advice that you would each share with young women who are just starting to navigate their career paths, or women who are debating a career change or are at a major intersection? Angela, why don't you go first?
Oh my gosh, just one? Really?
You can give a few. We will judge.
Oh my. I would say that is as doubtful as you are, believe in yourself, that you have God-given abilities. Have that growth mindset, work on it. It doesn't happen overnight. Work on your growth mindset and be open to new opportunities. Be a lifelong learner and share what you've learned. You know, you can't compete with others. You're only in the race against yourself. So celebrate your accomplishments, because your education and your career accomplishments, those are real possessions in your life that nobody's going to be able to take away from you. And then as women, we need to be gentle with ourselves. Okay. We have a right to be here. We have a purpose, and you just need to follow your own path and be kind, be thankful, be humble, be generous, and those things will come back to you.
That's really wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. Cindy, do you have any advice you'd like to share?
Oh, just one piece. It feels like such high pressure. I want, I guess the main thing is like, I think we're made for more than we sometimes believe we are. And I heard this TED talk once that I thought was so interesting. This woman was talking about, she had a pet snake, and her pet snake was about 5 years old, and she brought it to the vet and said, my snake is not growing. You know, what's going on? And the doctor was like, oh, okay, well, your snake looks about 3 years old. She's like, no, my snake is 5 years old. And then after a certain line of questioning, he said, how big is your snake's cage? She goes, oh, about yay big. And he says, well, that's your problem. Snakes grow into their environment, so they need a cage that is bigger than their current body size. And I can't unattach myself from that visual, because you need to recognize when your cage is too small. You might be really comfortable, but your cage might be too small to allow for you to grow. And so when you hit those moments, just know you can jump into another cage, and that decision can just be reversed. If you're like, I got into a cage and I'm in over my head, you know, no decision is all that permanent that you can't make a change. But to be able to recognize those moments where you feel like you're stalling in your growth, it's your choice on whether you want to stay stalled or whether you jump into another opportunity.
I like that example a lot. I'm going to have to keep that one in mind.
I know it really sticks with you.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's something that's applicable in many parts of life. So having the visual is really helpful. I mean, I really appreciate both of you being here today. You've shared a lot of great insights, your experiences, both major setbacks as well as major achievements, have brought a lot of great perspective to everyone here today. I think that there's a lot of good takeaways, and if anything I were to say, this is just reiterates why these conversations are so important and why these discussions must continue. So it was a delight to be here with you today, but I'll kick it back to Patty to share her closing thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining, us this afternoon, spending your lunch hour with us if everyone's in the same time zone. And I mean, a big round of applause for Cindy, Angela, and Katie. Thank you all very much. That was wonderful. I've certainly had many panel interviews, and our panelists were wonderful. But Katie, I'm going to tell you, you are an excellent moderator. I was very impressed with your listening skills. And just the way you were, you were really listening and incorporating new questions as you were hearing what our panelists were saying. I mean, to our panelists, I mean, your level of sharing and vulnerability that you shared with all of us today was truly touching. So thank you so much for that. I mean, I'm inspired. I was inspired by your stories of who inspired you, of your examples of your pivots and the little moments that became big moments. But probably for me, the most impactful was, being so mindful of how we show up, and that really resonated with me. So for both of you, thank you so much for sharing all of that information. I mean, I've been in my career for a long time, and I've learned some new things today. And the visual on the snake story I'm taking with me forever. So thank you for that, Cindy. Just a couple of final comments. You know, the Women of UC is a network that individuals need to opt into. For everyone who is on our call today, you'll automatically be added to our listserv as an attendee of the event, but we're always looking to grow our listserv and our network of Women of UC. So if you get additional information in the future, whether it's through email or a newsletter or anything, please share it with your own network as we're continuing to grow this group here. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions, ideas for future programming. We're always interested in hearing what you all want and need from our group, and if you want to volunteer. We're still looking to expand the planning committee and others involved in the committee. So if you're interested in helping us out, I'd appreciate it. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Maggie. And thank you everyone again. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you all.